listening. I just wanted to mention a few quick thoughts I have about managing stress. Um, the first thing I want to mention is that a lot of times there's some stress that we do know about, some stress that we don't know about. Um, and by that I mean there's some things that we can anticipate, some things we absolutely cannot anticipate at all. So, one of the first things that can be helpful is to identify what are the things that we do have control over and what can we do about that. And even for the things we don't have direct control over. So, I can't control the weather, right? But I can control, do I have an umbrella? Do I have good tires on a vehicle? Do I have maybe a snow shovel? So there are things that even for things we don't have control over, that we can still somehow do something to impact the situation most of the time. And I think another thing that can be very helpful, especially when we feel particularly overwhelmed, is to try and take a step back. Um, Someone who runs a marathon, about halfway through, they're going to get exhausted, feel like they just can't keep going. And that's a normal part of the process. But the way to push through that is just to take one step, one foot in front of the next, one foot in front of the next, over and over and over again. And eventually they're going to complete the marathon. It's that same thing no matter how big a task is, no matter how big or overwhelming whatever we're facing is. It can typically be broken down into much smaller pieces. And once it's broken down into smaller pieces, we can then manage those pieces a lot better. Because then it goes from one massive thing to just, okay, I just have to do one little thing. I'll use moving as a practical illustration from that. You cannot just pack everything up from an entire house in one moment, put it on a truck. You might have to go room to room or even part of a room to part of a room. If there's a bookshelf, you don't just pack the whole bookshelf off. You take some of the books off, box those up, and then see what you can do about the bookshelf itself, and then go from there. And then once you have all the boxes, figure out how you're going to get those on the truck, and then move them onto the truck. Same thing with getting it off the truck, right? Just kind of one step at a time. So what could seem massive trying to move can actually become a much smaller thing when you just take it one step at a time. So the workload's the same, but the felt stress from that's a whole lot less because you don't have to tackle the whole challenge. You're just tackling whatever that next step is. I think something else that can be really helpful is to understand we're going to miss some pieces. We're going to drop the ball on some things. And that's okay and that's normal. Um, in fact, a study was done and they found that if someone accomplishes about 60 to 80% of whatever their goal is over a week, they're probably going to show some progress. But if they accomplish 80 to 100%, they're going to see a lot of progress. What stuck out to me is there's not a whole lot of difference between the guy who does 81% of things and 100% of things. So if you have to have something, if you have to drop the ball on something, that's okay. In fact, that's going to happen. But what can help is make sure that that 20% or even 40% that's being dropped, make sure that's not important. Focus on the important next steps, no matter how small they are. And that overwhelming mountain of stress can become much more manageable and can feel like it's a whole lot less stress. And what can help also is to take the perspective of what can I control? And if I can control it, what can I do about it? If I can't control it, how can I let go of worrying about that or stressing about that? Or maybe even finding something I can control. And having a lot of wisdom in terms of how do I distinguish between both of them. One of the things I'll leave off with is that no matter what we're facing outside of us, we can always control our perspective. We can always control our own attitude about what we're going through. So those are just a couple quick moments of thoughts about some ways that we can manage stress. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. If not, I'll look forward to talking with you next week.